Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I would like you to all give a warm welcome to our main speaker, Milton.
I'm Milton. I'm an alcoholic. Excuse me, I have a little emphysema and bronchitis on top of it. Geez, with that introduction he gave me, I don't know how I live up to it. Checks in the mail, Mike. I like to put out dates for people like to figure things out. I was born here in Southern California in 1935. Had my first blackout drunk in Tijuana, Mexico in 1950. Called Alcoholics Anonymous, was directed to a meeting in 1957. Went to that meeting in 1966. And I got sober in 1973. So I was sure no rocket to start them, that's for sure. There's probably nobody here like me. See, when I sat in these meetings, and I thought, oh my God, what has happened to me? You know, what has become of me? An AA meeting, you know, all these crap hits. And I read the big book, and I said, we are people who do not normally mix. And I say, I look at them and I say, you got that right. You know? And then I'd tell them that, you know, I'd say, if I saw any of you crapheads in a bar, I'd drink somewhere else. And they say, keep coming back. And I thought, God, you can't even insult these people, you know. And I just, you know, now in retrospect, you know, now that I've been sober for some time, the program is so simple, you know. It's such a simple, common sense thing that I can't figure out for the life of me what, you know, I wasn't that dense. Why was it so hard to learn it? And I realized that if you fight it tooth and nail all the way, that makes it a little bit difficult. And that's what I did. I fought this thing just from the very beginning. I fought everything about it. I couldn't see how anything you said here or anything that was in the 12 steps could help me stop drinking or do anything about my life. And so I hated it so much. I can't figure out why I was here. Why was I sitting in the room? If I hated it so much, why didn't I go to a bar? Well, I did a lot, you know. I'd go up to the old timers and say, you read Psycho-Cybernetics? How about transactional analysis for the layman? Have you read that? You know? Have you read the games people play? I'm okay, you're okay. You ready? It really makes you popular. You know, you start telling old timers how it's done, telling them you have all the answers. Then I'd get my feelings hurt and I'd go out. Now I would never come back to where I was going when I got sober. I'd go to a new area because I had an ego. And I wasn't going to raise my hand as a newcomer. So I'd say, you know, I've been around AA 4 years, or I've been coming to these meetings for a long time. And there'll always be some old timer say, how long have you been sober, kid? Oh, half hour? 45 minutes? I don't know. I just didn't have a clue. Before I get ahead of myself, I'll give you a little rundown of I was born here in Los Angeles, like I told you, in Hollywood, and my mom was way ahead of her time. She was married 5 times until I was 11. And one of the guys she married twice. And I was one of those kids that my mom would say, we're going to call Kelly Daddy. I want you to call Kelly Daddy. What happened to Walter? Walter was here yesterday, you know. You're not supposed to call anybody else alcoholics, but if they waddle like ducks and they swim like ducks and they quack like ducks, they're probably ducks. And my mother was married to 4 ducks. And it was just drinking and hell raising all the time, just round the clock. And And in between marriages, when my mom wasn't married, my mother was periodic. And that really keeps you off balance, because you come home from school day after day after day, and the house is clean, and there's food in the icebox, and your clothes are clean, and the beds are made, and you know. Then one day you bring a bunch of your little friends home to play, you know, and there's 2 taxi cabs parked on the front lawn and 19 naked people dancing around the house, and you know we're on a run. Mom's taking a run at it again, and then she'd forget where she lived, and I was fine until the icebox started getting kind of. I was a big kid, and I ate a lot. And when the icebox started getting kind of shallow, you know, I'd start to worry about her when she'd come home. And I'd go down to this grocery store and shoplift food. And I ate a lot of lunch meat because the pack of lunch meat would just fit in my back pocket, you know, it's like a wallet. But I used to blame. I never blamed my mom too much, because I think from the very beginning I knew that she did the best she could. You know, it wasn't easy for a woman to raise a big, obstinate, stubborn, won't do anything she says kid. I remember one she's giving me a spanking for the coat hanger. I started to laugh at her, you know. I hear she's wailing away at me, you know, trying to get some discipline into me, and I'm just laughing at her, you know. She said, "Come back here." And I just walked out of the house, and she says, "Are you coming back tonight?" And I said, "Maybe, maybe not." And I was like 14 or 15, and I wasn't allowed to play with most of the kids on the block because I was a juvenile delinquent, who I was. You know, my mom worked, tried to keep a house, party, and take care of me. You know, it's a pretty handful. And I just grew up thinking that this was it. You know, all my role models were drunks. Everybody I knew in my life that I cared anything about were drunks. I remember playing in the house by myself when I was 4 or 5 years old, taking a whiskey bottle and filling it full of water and pouring shots of water and drinking them and pretending I was getting drunk. I mean, I was practicing, you know. I was practicing being an alcoholic. You know, if you practice from something when you're very young, you get good at it, you know. Isn't that right, Tom? You know, these guys we sail against that have been sailing since they're 4 years old are goddamn good sailors, you know. When I was practicing drinking from the time I was 4, I was a goddamn good drinker, you know. And I got this, what time did I quit? 5'2"? I got this, I was about 16 years old, and I was in business for myself. I was an entrepreneur. And it was, in those days they called it Midnight Auto Supply. And I sold car radios at night, sold them to a junkyard dealer. And the car radio that I specialized in was a 49 Ford radio. And the 49 Ford radio was really a piece of work. In 49 it had push a button and it would seek a station, you know. The little dial would travel back and forth across it. It was an expensive radio. Around $110, and I think I got $9 for each copy. And I had taken the radio out of this guy's car, and it was like 10 to 2. She decided to go to the store, and she jumped in the car, and I went out the other side with the radio, and I started running away. She's yelling at the top of her lungs, "Stop, thief!" And I ran right by a retired policeman and his German Shepherd. And the cop had me in the hammer lock, and the dog had me by the pant leg, and he drove back to the lady, and he says, "Ma'am," he says, if I get mixed up in this, I'll be filling out paperwork until for the rest of my retirement. So I've got his address, I know where he lives, I got his phone number. He promised me he'll do whatever you want. If you want to call the police, call the police. Work out any deal out. And he left. And I started crying, and I told the woman that my mother was an invalid in a wheelchair, and there was no food in the house. And boy, I really laid this story on her. And she started bawling, and I put the radio back in her car. Now, I've had 5 car radios stolen in my lifetime. What goes around comes around. And every time they've stolen a car radio out of my car, they make a hole in the dashboard about that big. It cost $3,000 to put a $150 radio back in the car, you know. Well, I didn't do that. I mean, I took the radio all out, unscrewed everything, and took it out. So I just had to put it right back. You know, there's nobody has any pride in their workmanship anymore. You know, nobody gives a crap. You know. And I got the car radio all working and everything like that, and she let me go. And I was skipping home, and I was thinking, boy, Barnum's right. There's a sucker born every minute. And then when her husband and son came home from Lockheed, they were on the night shift, my story lost something in translation. Because the next day there was two big juvenile detectives picked me up and carted me off to Hollywood Station. And Bob Flack, the director of the Hollywood Boys Club, had a thing with the police. But if any of his club boys got picked up, had a Boys Club card in their pocket, they'd call him. Well, he knew my situation. He knew my home life. I had a key to the Boys Club of Hollywood. I was one of the few kids that had a key. If things weren't going well at home, I could let myself into the club on the weekends, and there was a place to sleep, and there was food, and there was showers, and it was a home away from home. You know, this Fred did a lot of work with troubled children, and I never told this story, but there was this guy, Whitey Ford. He was a thug, and we all admired him. We really admired this guy, you know. He was kind of an albino. He looked like Gary Busey. And he was holding court one Friday night at the Boys Club when they had movies. And we were all, you know, in awe of him. And Fred says, "Come here, Whitey." And Whitey walked into the club and he says, "You guys come here too." He reached in his pocket, he took a $10 bill, and he put a $10 bill on the table. And he reached down underneath the deal and he got a book, a primer, Run, Spot, Run. He said, $10 of yours, Whitey, if you can read one page. Whitey couldn't read. We all looked at him like, "You dummy, you can't read?" He had nobody hanging around him from that time on. This guy knew people, and I showed up in his office. He came down and got me out of jail, and he said, I want to see you in my office Monday morning." And I went in to see him. And Bert Lewis, the director of the LA Times Boys Club downtown, owned a barber college. They put me in barber school. I was 16 and a half years old, and I got an apprentice license. And I'd already dropped out of school, and I started cutting hair. It was during the Korean War, and guys were getting discharged. They were taking their GI Bill and going to the barber school. So they kind of adopted me as a mascot, took me down to Main Street, got me a bunch of phony ID cards, and so I started drinking on Skid Row at 16 years old. And I'd been drinking before, but I had never drank at a bar. And I seen what alcoholism did, you know, I firsthand. And my grandma took me aside one time and says, "Milton, nobody in your family has been able to drink, especially the men." I said, "Yeah, but Grandma, you don't understand. My case is going to be different." I really thought it was going to be different. I thought I was going to be able to handle it. And the funny thing is, I was 17 years old, and 16, 17 years old, and I was already having problems. I was already, you know, getting in trouble over my drinking. I got through barber school, and I got out, and I cut hair for about an hour and a half. I figured, no, this ain't it. I was all bummed out one day, and I was walking down the street, and there's a billboard that says, it had a kind of spiffy uniform with a sword. It said, "The Marines make men." I thought I'll join the Marines. They'll turn me into a man, and that's still just a little child in this big body. I felt like a kid. And I went down with a friend of mine, and we enlisted, and David got called up before I did. Because it was during the Korean War, they were letting people out towards the end of the war, and they weren't taking the Marine Corps was a pretty small outfit, so they only had so many openings. He went all the way through basic training, and he came back from basic training, and I saw him at a party one night. He looked nice, but he was totally changed. This was a really gregarious, outgoing guy. And what I saw was a total introvert, you know. They had slapped all the personality right out of him. And I saw him, and he got right at my face. He said, "Milton, whatever you do, don't go in the goddamn Marines." And he said it. I can remember, it was like yesterday. I mean, all the blood drained out of my face, you know, and I thought, yeah, what'll I do? The next day I went down, and I thought I was really good at doing was sniveling. You know, I went down to the Air Force recruiter and started sniveling, and he said, "Did they swear you in?" And I said, "No." He says, "Well, then you're free game." He said, "I'll sign you up for the Air Force, and I'll write them a letter, and you have 6 months before we call you up." You can surf all summer, whatever you want. I think that was on a Thursday. Wednesday, I was standing in the middle of the day building my underwear. That's the first time I realized the government does lie to you. And it was another one of those things. I remember at 4 o'clock in the morning, this mean man, my first day in basic training, this mean man, you know, screaming and yelling at us, and rolled me out of the bed onto the floor. I thought, no, this sure ain't it. Really screwed the pooch on this one. You know. In my 4 years in the Air Force, I can sum that up. I don't even know what an Article 15. Article 15, you get a court-martial or a captain's mast is a summary court. Article 15 is just local punishment. They take away one stripe and you have two weeks of extra duty. And I got like 11 Article 15s in the 4 years I was in the service. One of the guys said, I told him I was an aircraft mechanic. You're not an aircraft, you're a gardener. He said, I see you always over the Air Sea Rescue Squadron mowing lawns and painting rocks white, you know. In my service career, I wrecked a weapons carrier one night on the way to midnight chow. I was drunk, injured some of the guys pretty bad. Ran a weapons carrier through the CO's Quonset, knocked all those plaques on the floor. One night I was drunk. I was towing an airplane one night after I'd been drinking, and I tore the wingtip off. That's expensive. Took a motorcycle off the side of a mountain at over 100 miles an hour, drunk. That was just, you know, I was like little Mr. Missile Fixer, little Abner, you know, a little thunder and lightning. I was either in trouble, I was getting out of trouble, or I was waiting for them to find out what I'd done, you know. And I got discharged. I remember arguing with the captain. I said, "How come everybody got a good conduct medal? I don't get a good conduct medal." If you get an honorable discharge, kid, you should be in Leavenworth, you know. When I came back to the States, and the only thing I learned in the Air Force was how to drink. How to drink badly. I was a daily drunk when I got back. I was 21 years old, and I was a daily drunk. I was back not more than 4 or 5 months. And I got a little bender out in Santa Monica, and I was in the back of the police car filling out the accident report, and the policeman says, "I smell alcohol. Have you been drinking?" I said, "Yeah, I was on the party boat. I had some beers on the party boat." I didn't tell him I also drank a half quart too. He says, "Well, the police chief wants everybody that smells of alcohol to come down." And we bought a brand new machine. This was 1957. We bought a brand new machine. It's called a toximeter, and they're brand new. They just came out. They measure your blood alcohol content. And the police chief wants anybody that smells alcohol. I said, "I don't think you got any problem." He says, "But you got to come down and blow in it anyhow." So I went down there and I blew in it. The two cops that were running it got in a fight. They started arguing. They called me back, and I blew in it again. I blew in it again. I got my girlfriend's father, who was a criminal attorney, to come represent me. And he said, "Your judge is the biggest drunk in town." He said, "We don't have any problem here. We'll plead you innocent." He went over and he talked to the DA, and he came back and says, "We're changing your plea to guilty." I said, "Why?" He said, "You had the highest reading for Memorial Day weekend." What do you mean? He said, "You blew a .35. You're not even supposed to be conscious when you blow a .35. And the cop said he didn't even think you were drinking, you know. And that tells the court that you're a habitual drunk. There are some states now that if you blow a high reading and you're acting sober, they throw the book at you because they know you're a habitual drinker. You know, you're driving drunk all the time. You know, they're not. Government's gotten smarter. I mean, what's the limit now? 0.08? Geez, I'd be afraid to put on aftershave lotion, you know. 0.08. You get that just sitting in a bar, don't you? But I got back and I got another brainstorm. Was, you know, maybe if I got married and settled down, that would fix me, you know. And so I had this gal that I'd gone with before I got into the service, and she had sent me a Dear John and married a Swabie, and had 2 kids, and one of them died. And they got a divorce. And we started going together. She lived up in above San Francisco, and I lived down in Los Angeles. We had a long-range relationship, you know, where it's basically the relationship is in your head. And somehow I ended up being married to her, and we had 2 kids just like that. And I hated the woman. Just hated her, you know. I would go to bed at night, I'd be so far away from her, I'd put one hand on the floor to keep falling out of bed, you know. And I'm sure she was on her side of the bed with her hand on the floor. I mean, it's one of those situations, why were we staying together, you know? For the kids, I can't remember why I stayed together with this woman. I hated her, just hated her. And I got this plan in my head that if I could get some money saved and get out of this marriage and just get away from this wife and these kids and go back to my life, my wonderful life, you know. That's what Clancy calls dynamic memory. That's why there's always the good old days, you know. You know, the good old days aren't good old days. We don't remember the bad. We just remember the good. They say the reason for that is so there's more than one child in a family. When we could remember how much childbirth really hurt, there'd only be one kid. So there's always the good old days, and I wanted to go back to that life that I had that was so wonderful before I married this gal. While I was saving my money to make my escape, she took all $37 out of the checking account in the only car, and left her kid and our kids and went off with a married man. And here I am, a full-blown alcoholic, 27, 28 years old. I got a 5-year-old that's not mine, an 8-month-old, and a 20-month-old. And the 8-month-old and the 20-month-old are both in diapers. No family living around me, nobody to help me take care of the kids. And I thought, boy, your life just isn't getting any better. And all I had was a little Honda scooter. And I couldn't get on the tarmac with it because I'd get flattened. So I rode all the way from Newbury Park, 9 miles in the dirt alongside the road with the hubcaps and the wine bottles to work and home from work. I put the baby on my lap. The little girl would get on my back and hang on, and I put a diaper bag over my shoulder and I dropped them off at the babysitters. As soon as they saw where they were going, they'd start screaming. Of course, now we see all these videotapes, you know. They're probably putting them in a cage and giving them dog biscuits, you know, because when I came to pick them up that night, they'd be screaming, you know, waiting for me to pick them up. You know, I don't know what the hell was going on during the daytime, but it was just, you know, it was just horrendous. And I decided I had to quit drinking. So I couldn't raise those kids and drink. So I took all the hard liquor in the house and locked it in the cabinet out in the garage and threw the key away. I thought I'd just drink beer and wine, because you know beer and wine that's hardly drinking, you know. And I was doing pretty good on that until I ran into a sale at the Mayfair Market on Red Mountain, $1.29 a gallon. That was my undoing with the beer and wine, and I started doing something that got my attention. Next door neighbor gave me an old beat up DeSoto, and he put brakes on it, helped me put brakes on it, get it running and stuff like that. I gave him $5 to make it legal, and it was a typical drunk's car. It had no first or reverse, heater didn't work, no headliner, cardboard windows, you know. You see the cars parked out in front of beer joints at 6 o'clock in the morning. I get the kids in there, and the father came down and got the boy. And the 2 babies, I'd get them bathed in their crib, and then I would go up to the Tally Ho about 5 blocks away. I'd have a couple of beers, play a game of pool, and come back and check on the kids. I'd go up and have a few beers, and come back and check on the kids. It'd be about midnight. I said, oh, the kids will be all right till 2 o'clock. And I wake up the next morning, it's 10 o'clock. The birds are chirping, you know. My teeth are asleep, my hair itches. I realized I'm in the backseat of the car. And those kids have been home alone in their cribs for 10 hours. I say, oh God, please, please, let those children be all right, and that house be all right, and I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, I will never, ever do this again. See, I was told all my life drinking was my problem. But you couldn't convince me. But I had to realize that the reason I wasn't getting home on those occasions was due directly to my drinking. There was no way even I, with my denial, could avoid that. If I hadn't drank so much, I would have passed out in the car. I would have got the car home. You know. And that's when I called Alcoholics Anonymous in '66. This guy Bob Mayhew came down and saw my situation, called his 2 daughters, and had them come down and whisked me off to a meeting. Something was happening to me that I thought was really good. I got well quick. I mean, within 6 months, I had a new girlfriend, I had a new job, I had a nice car, The house was painted, the lawns were mowed, the creditors were off my back. You know, and I was at a meeting and some nice little lady came to me and says, Milton, you don't look like an alcoholic. I was combing my hair in the restroom later on, and I looked in the mirror and I says, yeah, I don't. What does an alcoholic look like, you know? You'll tell yourself anything when you want to go back out again. I said, you don't look like one because you're not an alcoholic. Anybody that can put their life together like you did in 6 months, all by yourself, of course not giving AA any credit, can't possibly be an alcoholic. Now, I didn't start drinking right away. I had no intentions of drinking. I just wasn't going to those goddamn meetings anymore. But I still hated the meetings. I was out to dinner with this new girlfriend, and she says, why can't you have a little wine with your dinner? That's not going to hurt anything. Reasonable request. Had a little wine with my dinner. Went to the lounge show, had a couple of scotch and waters, tall glass, no ice, you know, a lot of water. Went home, took her home, didn't make any obscene passes at her, you know. Took the babysitter home. I had a babysitter. I was paying for a babysitter. Didn't make any passes at the babysitter. So in the end of my bed, you know, taking my shoes off, and I thinking, well, they must either be all wet over there in Alcoholics Anonymous, or I'm not an alcoholic, because the first drink, they say the first drink gets you drunk, and I'm sober as a judge. I don't know whether it was a week or 2 weeks or a month, but somewhere along the way I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm watching my favorite program on television. I don't wake up at Cup 2, which is the Indian Head, you know. Remember the music going with that? It was just the right resonance to split your head right in the middle, you know, just peel the skin back and try to set the alarm clock so it wouldn't go off when I pulled the plunger up. You only had 18 minutes to sleep, and I just, like, what happened? What happened? The lights are turned off, the gas is turned off, the house is being repossessed, the car is gone, the girlfriend is gone, the job's gone, you know. You know, I was doing so well. What the hell happened? And I did that 3 or 4 times in the 8 years that I slipped. And my last sobriety, my last drunk was not my worst drunk by any means. It was kind of a funny drunk. I borrowed these 2 guys in the bar, these 2 lower companions, and their pickup truck. And took a boat I had. My car wasn't strong enough to pull the boat, but I still had the boat. You think I'd have sold them got a decent car, wouldn't you? We had 3 of us. Took my oldest son. We went to Casitas to go fishing. Now these were 2 bad drunks. They go into the bait shop, combination bait shop liquor store, and they get a package of bait and a 6-pack of beer. I said, what are you going to do with the 6-pack of beer between you? Well, we're fishing, we're not drinking. Well, that's a novel concept. I got a case of beer and a bottle of scotch, you know, because we're going to be out there all day in the sun, you know. And it was one of those, it was Thanksgiving weekend, and it was Saturday. And I'd started my run for the weekend about Monday, and so I was toasted by the time we got to the boat ramp. All I remember about was falling out the boat ramp and on my back, and on the trailer, you know, still hurts. And the next thing I remember, they're sitting on me, they're wrestling me on the bottom of the boat, on the floor of the boat, trying to get the keys to the boat away from me. And I'm saying something like, it's my goddamn boat, and I'll drive the boat if I want to drive the boat. And the next thing I know, I wake up and it's pouring down rain. It's just coming down cats and dogs. We're on Highway 101, stop and go traffic. I'm in the back of this pickup truck, just drenched, you know. They just dumped me in the back of like a sack of oats, and let me lay there and just soak up the water. I was looking through the window, getting a little attitude, and something rolled up against me. It was the scotch bottle had about that much scotch left in it. And I looked around, there was a couple beer cans rolling around with me too, so I popped a beer can, and I was drinking the scotch and drinking the beer and waving at the cars, you know. People were pointing and laughing, and I thought it was cute. I got home and I got my kids from across the street, and I brought them back and put them in bed. The next morning I called the guy that had sponsored me, and I'd sponsored him, and he'd sponsored me. I'd sponsored him, he'd sponsored me. I worked for him, we drank together. He was like a father to me. I stole a lot of money from him, and real good friend. And Mel came over, and I was talking to him, I said, I want to quit drinking, Mel. I'm going to quit drinking. And he went, yeah, right, yeah, okay. I said, I want you to be my sponsor. He got this real pained look on his face, you know. says, well, and he says, I've been sober 3 years now, and I'm a secretary of a meeting, and I sponsor 6 guys. And he says, anybody that sponsors you, that says it look real bad. Well, I can see this. I must have got this hurt look on my face, because he real quickly says, no, never mind. I'll be your interim sponsor. We can find somebody to handle your contract. And I started doing things a little bit different. I got involved. Like Mike was saying, I started getting commitments. And I started a meeting in Newbury Park. They didn't have one there. And I was the secretary of the big meeting in Thousand Oaks in 6 months, because nobody that was elected wanted it. I was the 6th person they elected that was willing to take it. And I was 14 months sober, and I was riding my motorcycle out in the Insular Canyon in the hills. It was my escape, and it wasn't working. And all my problems were right there in front of my face. And I thought, God, if this is as good as it gets, I just should be drunk. And that happened to me so many times before, and I found myself in a bar. But because I was involved, because I had commitments, and because I was going to meetings, instead of going to a bar, I went to a meeting. A guy was there speaking, and he said something that kind of got my attention. He says, if you have a problem with alcohol, you put the plug in the jug. And the farther you get away from the drink, the better you are, the better you feel. You get along with everybody. They love you at work. Your neighbors love you. Your family love you. He said, yeah, you don't have to go to these cockamamie meetings. Well, what I heard was you don't have to go to these cockamamie meetings. Like, this guy's got a program where you can correspondence course maybe, or mail it in, or phone it in, or, He had my attention. He says, but if you're one of those people that the farther you get from the last drink, the more uncomfortable you are, the more suicidal you become. You can't get along with anybody. You have a problem we call alcoholism. You have to get a big book, 12 and 12, a sponsor, commitments, and do what the winners around here do. And he said, what that will do for you, that will make you feel so good about yourself. You'll feel so comfortable in your own skin that you won't find it necessary to drink. Now, I get chills when I reiterate that. Because that was my epiphany. I thought you just came here and you sat around and you just absorbed it, like sitting in a chicken coop becoming a chicken, it just doesn't work that way. Alcoholics Anonymous is school. In school, you got to do the homework. You got to go on the field trips. You got to show up for class. It's hard work, and it has to be done. There's an old saying, and believe me, I'm 65 years old, and I've spent a good part of that time trying to find a way around it. There isn't. That is, you get out of something what you put into it. That's your relationship with your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your job, your hobby, anything I can possibly think of. You're going to get out of it what you put into it. If you don't put anything into it, you're not getting anything out of it. And if you do get anything out of it, it's not going to mean anything. See, alcoholics like myself only take the easy way. I don't want to be inconvenienced. What, give you a ride home? It's 2 blocks out of my way. I can't be that inconvenienced. That's my attitude. Well, if you can't be inconvenienced and you want everything the easy way, the only thing that has value are things that you work for, things that you sacrifice for. So here I was 38 years old and had nothing in my life of value because I hadn't sacrificed or worked for anything. All I had was stuff that came easy, and that wasn't very much. It was enough, but I had a better attitude. But the program Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me that I don't need a lot of stuff. I've got everything. I had everything I needed back then to be happy. The life I have today, I am absolutely sure that the life that I love so much today, if I was drinking and had a negative attitude, that life would suck. Because if you have a negative attitude, you can find something wrong with anything you look at. If you have a positive attitude, you can find something right in everything you look at. Will Rogers said he never found a man he didn't like. I think what he was trying to say was he was a positive individual, and there wasn't something to like in every man he met. And I find that so true. Generally speaking, that is so true. When I got here, I didn't like anybody. I had a girlfriend 30 days before I got sober that said to me, Milton, you're a woman hater. I said, I'm no woman hater. I don't like anybody. And that was true. That was true. And now there's not I don't know anybody, know anybody personally that I dislike. What was that, being on goody two-shoes? No. It's because it's the comfortable way to live. Because in order to dislike somebody, you have to give them space in your head, you have to carry a resentment, you have to be angry. And something that alcoholics don't have a hard time realizing is that you can't be pissed off and happy at the same time. They seem to think they can pull it off, but they can't. And I want to thank Faith, who's over the Atlantic somewhere, hopefully, with their new baby, for asking me to speak. And I want to thank my buddy Mike for giving me a wonderful introduction. I hope I lived up to part of it. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.